The heat in Charleston never really fades, even when the sun dips below the marshes and the cicadas start their nightly chorus. It's a kind of heat that lingers, crawling beneath your skin, clinging to everything it touches, much like the unease that had begun to settle in my chest these past few weeks. I used to love coming home after work. The sight of our house, a two-story colonial with white shutters and a porch swaying lazily in the evening air, always filled me with peace. My wife, Claire, would usually be inside, cooking something that smelled like rosemary and garlic, the TV humming softly in the background, her laughter echoing faintly down the hallway. But lately, the house had started to feel empty. Even when she was in it. I parked my truck in the driveway and just sat there for a while, watching the porch light flicker. Inside, I could see her silhouette through the kitchen window. She was on her phone again. I couldn't hear her, but I knew that smile. That soft, secretive smile that wasn't meant for me. When I finally walked in, she turned around too quickly, slipping her phone into the pocket of her jeans. "Hey, babe," she said, brushing a loose strand of blonde hair from her face. "You're home early." I looked at the clock. "It's 7:30. "Same as always." She laughed lightly. "Feels earlier, I guess." I lost track of time. The smell of food filled the room, grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, her favorite. Mine too, once. But the warmth that used to live between us had gone cold. Everything she did lately felt rehearsed, like a performance for an audience I couldn't see. We ate mostly in silence. She scrolled through her phone between bites, pretending not to. I pretended not to notice. When she finally excused herself to take a quick shower, I collected the plates and stood by the sink, staring at her phone left face down on the counter. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. I knew what kind of man went through his wife's phone, the kind who no longer trusted her. I wasn't that man. At least, I hadn't been. But tonight, as the water began to run upstairs, and the sound of her humming floated down the hallway, I reached for the phone. And that's when everything started to unravel. The phone unlocked easily. No passcode, no fingerprint. She trusted me, or at least wanted me to think she did. At first, I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. I told myself I'd just check her notifications, maybe scroll a little. Just to put my mind at ease. But the truth is, I already knew there was something to find. My gut had known long before my hand started to tremble over that glowing screen. Messages. Most from friends, group chats about dinner plans, yoga schedules, and work gossip. The usual. But then one stood out. A single name at the bottom of the list that made my pulse quicken. D. No last name. No picture. Just the letter. The most dangerous kind of simplicity. I opened it. D. Can't stop thinking about last night. Claire, stop, you'll get me in trouble, grinning face with sweat. D. Worth it. Claire, you're impossible. D. You love that about me. My stomach twisted. I read those lines again, slower this time, trying to convince myself they meant something innocent, an inside joke, a friend being playful. But deep down, I knew. There was a tone in those words I hadn't heard from her in months. She used to text me like that. The shower upstairs stopped. My heartbeat filled the silence. I quickly locked the phone, placed it exactly where she'd left it, and leaned against the counter, trying to steady my breathing. When she came downstairs wrapped in a towel, her skin still glistening, she smiled, that same soft, distant smile, and said, "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a laugh. "Just tired, that's all." She kissed my cheek, quick and casual, like a neighbor's greeting. Then she passed by me, humming, completely unaware that the air between us had turned to glass, thin, fragile, ready to shatter. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that single letter, D, glowing in the dark like a warning. Every laugh, Every soft touch she'd given me lately replayed in my mind, and all of it felt like evidence. By morning, I had decided one thing. If there was a truth hiding behind that letter, I was going to find it. Even if it destroyed me. The morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen table, turning the cup of coffee in my hand into a small, trembling mirror. Claire was still upstairs getting ready for work, humming softly to herself again. That same song she'd been humming for weeks. I used to love that sound. Now it made my stomach tighten. She came down in her pale blue blouse, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary. Her perfume hit first, jasmine and something sharper underneath. Something new. "You working late tonight?" she asked, sipping her coffee. "Maybe," I said. "You?" She hesitated just a fraction too long. "No, I might grab a drink with Emily after work." Emily. The catch-all name she used when she didn't want questions. I smiled, pretending not to notice. "Tell her I said hi." She kissed me quickly and left. Her heels clicked down the porch steps, and I watched her car disappear past the magnolia trees lining our street. For a long time, I just stood there, letting the silence fill the house. Then I opened my laptop. Claire was careful, no strange phone calls, no lipstick on her collar clichés. But she had patterns. She left for work at 8 o'clock sharp, lunch at 12:30, home by 6 o'clock. Except lately, 6 o'clock had become 7:15. Then 8 o'clock. Always with excuses that sounded rehearsed. That morning, I drove downtown, not to the office, but to King Street, where Claire's architecture firm was located. I parked across the street, pretending to scroll my phone as people hurried past. At 12:30, she stepped out, phone in hand. She wasn't alone. A tall man followed her, dark hair, fitted shirt, expensive watch that caught the sunlight. He laughed at something she said, and she touched his arm lightly. That touch burned through me like acid. They walked down the street together, not close enough to be obvious, but close enough to know. I followed them to a small restaurant tucked behind a row of live oaks, one of those quiet places where no one would think to look. Through the glass, I watched them sit at a corner table. She smiled in a way I hadn't seen in months. She leaned in when he spoke. And then, the moment that hollowed me out completely. She reached across the table and took his hand. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The sounds of Charleston, cars, voices, the distant cry of gulls from the harbor, all faded into a single, high-pitched silence. I left before she saw me. I drove to the edge of the marshlands, where the city met the slow-moving water, and sat there until the sun began to sink. I'd always thought betrayal would feel like anger. Fire. Rage. But what I felt was quieter, colder. Like standing in a room after someone's blown out all the candles. When I got home, she was already there, barefoot in the kitchen, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Hey, babe. You okay? You look tired." "Just a long day," I said. "You?" She shrugged, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Same. You know how Emily talks, she never shuts up." I nodded. And smiled. Because I finally understood the rules of this game. And I was done playing fair. The next few days, I played my part perfectly. I still kissed her good morning. Still asked about her day. Still laughed when she told her stories about work. But something inside me had gone still, like the eye of a hurricane. I wasn't the same man she thought she was lying to. I was watching now. Listening. Planning. Claire had her phone with her constantly, even when she went to shower. She started locking it, too. That small change told me everything. She could feel the ground shifting, even if she didn't know why. I decided to test her. One evening, as we sat on the porch drinking iced tea, I mentioned casually. "Hey, ran into Emily today near the marina." Her eyes flicked up from her phone. Oh. Really? Yeah, I said. She didn't mention you. It was subtle, but I saw it, the flicker in her eyes, the split second of calculation before the smile returned. Oh, she must have forgotten. We only grabbed a quick drink. I nodded, pretending to accept it. But my chest felt like stone. If she could lie that easily, then she'd already crossed a line she couldn't come back from. That night, I opened her laptop when she fell asleep beside me. She never thought I'd think to check it, I was always the trusting husband. But I knew her iCloud synced her texts. And there they were. D, tomorrow. Same place. Claire, can't. He's been acting weird. D, then come after work. I'll wait. Claire, I'll see what I can do. I stared at that last line for a long time. I'll see what I can do. As if I were an obstacle, a scheduling inconvenience between her and him. I closed the laptop slowly, careful not to wake her. She looked peaceful in sleep, her face soft under the lamplight. The same woman I'd married 9 years ago, who once cried at our wedding when I promised to love her forever. But I didn't feel love anymore. Only something colder. Something that whispered wait. So I waited. The next evening, I told her I had to work late. She smiled, a little too easily, and said she might meet Emily again. I kissed her on the forehead and watched her drive away. Then I followed. She didn't go to Emily's. She went downtown, to that same quiet restaurant near King Street. And he was there, D, waiting outside in the dark, leaning against his car like he owned the night. I parked far enough away that she wouldn't notice and watched as they went inside together, hand in hand. That's when I took my phone and snapped a picture. A single click, silent, but heavy as a gunshot. Then another. And another. I didn't know what I was going to do with them yet. But I knew this, those photos were going to be the beginning of the end. Not just for her. For him too. When I closed the laptop that night, something inside me unhooked and settled into a form that had a face and a plan. It wasn't the hot, cinematic fury I had pictured in my head at 3 a.m. It was colder, quieter, the kind of patience that wears down even the hardest stone. If she wanted to play at secrets and whispers, I would give her a game she couldn't win. I started by cataloging everything. Names, dates, locations. Photos from the restaurant. Times stamped on texts. Little things that, stitched together, would make a pattern so clean a judge could follow it. I made folders on my laptop with banal names, groceries, garden, receipts. Underneath each, I hid a smaller folder, Claire, D. I backed everything up, and then backed up the backup to a thumb drive I slipped into the pocket of the jacket I never wore. If anything happened to the house, to me, the truth would still exist somewhere else. I told myself I wasn't cruel. I told myself I was being practical. But the truth was simpler and more honest, I wanted her to feel what I felt. Not in a burst of fury, but in the long, precise ache that waited at the end of what she'd done. First, I needed leverage. I needed D to think he had more to gain than to lose. I needed Claire to believe she could keep stepping over the line without consequence. And I needed a place where the truth would not simply die in a text thread or a locked drawer. Charleston provided that place. Many of its people lived off appearances, off the careful choreography of charity luncheons and dinner invitations. Pride and reputation were currency here. Use them, and you could bankrupt a person without touching their money. I started small. An anonymous email to D's firm, with one well-placed photograph attached, D and Claire, hands entwined in the corner booth, the background out of focus enough that the corporate logo on a nearby wall suggested they were employees of opposing companies. I didn't write anything accusatory. I left the subject line empty. Let curiosity do the rest. Men like D had a network, they were the sort who would worry about whispers in the office. Within 24 hours, his LinkedIn had a new message from someone he didn't know. Within 48, I had proof his boss had asked HR to monitor the situation. Next, I used the social textures of Charleston against them. I sent an anonymous tip, not accusing, only suggesting, to a woman on our street who organized the Magnolia Society's summer ball. The tip mentioned a possible scandal involving a local architect. Claire's firm worked with local design councils, and an attendee who might behave unbecomingly. She replied with the sort of thin, conspiratorial curiosity I'd expected. Who? When? I fed her just enough. The ball was 2 weeks away. A certain man had been seen with someone not his wife. It was intoxicating to watch the gears of small-town propriety begin to turn. While that was rolling, I became someone I hadn't been in years, charming, attentive, present. I took her to lunch on a Wednesday when the office threatened to keep her late. I brought her coffee. I made the bed with the exact corner tucks she liked. I learned how to be the man who smelled like trust. That was part of the plan, to make her complacent, to make her believe I had no idea. The quieter I grew, the sharper my advantage. I also leaned into Dee's ego. I called him once, a number I'd looked up under the pretext of being a vendor, and spoke with a practiced, casual tone about a project that might overlap with his after-hours clients. When he asked who I was, I smiled at the phone in the empty garage and gave him a name that sounded like Charleston air, Marcus Hale. I hinted at opportunities, at exclusivity, at a rooftop meeting where discretion was expected. Dee liked the sound of the rooftop. Then I sent Claire a message that I knew would land like a splinter, a photo of a small handcrafted keychain I'd bought her on our honeymoon in Beaufort, left on the front seat of her car. No message, just the picture. It was childish, petty, and perfectly surgical. She texted back within minutes, "Where did you get that?" I replied with an equally neutral line, "Oh, found it when I was cleaning out the truck." She didn't press further. People who were hiding things were experts at not asking the wrong questions. As the week before the ball shortened, I tightened the noose. I made sure Claire's calendar had the right gaps: dinner with Emily on a Wednesday night, the ball on Saturday. I made reservations at the same restaurant where she'd met Dee, under a different name, on a different night, and I paid the bill in cash so there would be no record I'd been there the night she wasn't supposed to be. I started planting little narratives, a whispered worry to her sister about work stress, a casual complaint at a neighborhood bar about how people change. Each whisper was designed to make the rumor mill spin slow and mean. Part of me liked the performance. Part of me resented that I needed to play. The last piece was the direct bait. Marcus Hale, me, offered Dee the meeting on a Thursday night and suggested the rooftop of an old warehouse near the Cooper River, one of those places where the city lights met the dark water and nobody looked twice. I promised anonymity, craft whiskey, and a conversation worth his time. I sent a precise address and a silent photo of the rooftop skyline, cropped and grainy so he'd be tempted by its privacy. He bit. I wanted it public enough to sting and private enough to humiliate. The ball would be the stage. The rooftop would be the trap. On Thursday night, I sat in my truck across from the warehouse and watched a black sedan pull up. Dee stepped out, checked his watch, and scanned the shadows. He was careful, but not careful enough. I watched him disappear up the rusted stairs. I waited 5 minutes, then climbed to the roof myself. The city smelled like fried food and salt. A faint breeze cleaned the skin of the night. I texted Dee, from my burner phone, Marcus Hale, to say I'd be there in 5 and to come alone. His reply was brisk, confident. A man who thinks he's untouchable has a particular kind of composure. When he arrived, I was already there, leaning against the low wall that looked out over the water. He looked older up close, lines around his eyes, hair that had begun to betray him at the temples. He offered a nod that was more wary than manly. His jaw worked like he was practicing being casual in front of someone he didn't care to impress. "You Marcus?" he asked. "Someone who likes to make deals," I said. We sat at a rusted table and drank from cheap bottles I'd brought. I let him talk. Men like him loved their own sound. He told me where he worked, the projects he had, the clients he courted. He started to talk about his life in a way that made me see how much of it he'd built on being liked, desired, unobstructed. Slowly, conversationally, I introduced Claire. I described her, her eye for detail, the way she'd lit up a meeting last month, and watched his face change. He smiled like a man who'd been given permission to covet. I didn't tell him I knew. I let him think what he wanted. Then I slid the first photograph across the table, face down. He didn't pick it up. His hand hovered. I watched his fingers twitch. He wanted to see the damage he'd done. "When did you take this?" he asked. 2 weeks ago, I said. "King Street. Corner table." He paled. Alone on that roof, with the river beneath and the city a low hum behind us, D looked suddenly smaller. He was a man whose appetite had never been measured against consequence before. "I can make it go away," he said. Look, I can help you. Money, connections. I can." He was bargaining for something he thought he could buy. I listened, cataloging the panic like a vintner noting flavor. Then I shook my head slowly. "I don't want your money," I said. "I want something else." "What?" His voice was thin, almost pleading. "For you to stop," I said. "For you to tell her it's over. For you to never speak to her again. And for you to leave this city." He laughed, a brittle sound that curled into itself. "You want exile? What do you think I am? A boy who can be chased out by a jealous husband? You think too highly of yourself," I said. "But that's negotiable. There are other routes, one of which includes the Magnolia Society ball this Saturday. Your name could be mentioned. In the wrong way. Or your firm could hear rumors about after-hours meetings and unprofessional conduct. You could lose clients. Lose assignments. Or you could walk away." He looked at the river, at the light scraping the water, and for the first time, I think he felt the precariousness of his choices. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, voice small and raw. I didn't answer. I watched him squirm under the weight of his own misjudgment. After an hour of talk and whiskey, we agreed on terms that left him angry and humbled in equal measure. He would stop contacting Claire. He would be seen less in town. He would not attend the ball. In return, I promised nothing, only the implication that compliance would buy him peace. When he left, his shoulders were tight, his mouth a thin line. I watched his car melt into the night and felt nothing like victory. The plan was in motion, true. But plans have their own currency of consequence, and some debts collect interest faster than a man anticipates. Back home, Claire's scent lingered on the pillow. She had left a folded note on the kitchen counter, "Thanks for dinner. See you at the ball," and a small kiss drawn with lipstick. I slid the thumb drive into the jacket pocket and lay awake until the house fell completely quiet. There are lines a man tells himself to sleep at night. I had built new ones, rationalizations wrapped in purpose. The trap was set. Now I had to wait for the tension to snap. The Magnolia Society ball was everything Charleston loved to be, polished, perfumed, and perfectly lit so the night looked like a promise. The garden behind the old plantation house glowed with paper lanterns, and the magnolia trees stood like patient witnesses wrapped in moonlight. People moved between tables the way secrets used to move through this town, slow, deliberate, and always careful to avoid the light. Claire's dress was the kind that caught light and kept it. She glided through the crowd with the easy smile of someone accustomed to being admired. I had watched her rehearse that smile in the mirror for years and then forgotten how real it had once felt. Tonight, it was an armor. Daniel Reed, had not shown up. I'd expected that, I'd made sure his absence would look like a concession. Good men often stayed away from trouble. Bad men came to swagger. I sat near the bandstand, a glass of water in front of me, not wine. People assumed I was nervous, some thought I'd come to reconcile. The rumor mill I'd fed had already begun to whisper. By the time the mayor stood to say a few dull sentences about philanthropy and upkeep of the gardens, 2 people had slipped away from their tables to check their phones. I counted heartbeats in my chest the way men used to count money, meticulously, with a small thrill at the margins. When the mayor finished, he raised his glass to toast the society's volunteers. Applause scattered like soft coins. I rose too. I walked toward the microphone as if I belonged to the ceremony, the world opening like a stage. People turned because a man moving toward a microphone always commands attention. I just wanted to say a few words, I heard my voice say. It sounded calm, unervingly so. About things we hide from one another. The first rustle of confusion. A few polite laughs that went nowhere. I waited. The room tightened. I've lived in Charleston all my life, I said. I love everything about this city, its lights, its music, and yes, its reputation for decorum. We pride ourselves on manners. I let the irony sit heavy between the tables. But sometimes, manners become a way to bury truth. Someone near me coughed. Claire's hand found the back of my mind like a reflexive prayer. She was beautiful and small under the lanterns, and the beauty made it worse. I had arranged for the projection in the boardroom 2 nights earlier, a small equipment rental, a technical hiccup blamed on the society's AV team, a volunteer who owed me a favor. I'd rehearsed the angles for weeks. There is a practical joy in engineering a spectacle, the way the mechanics of it reduce a complicated hurt to an act any onlooker could understand. The screen came alive behind the mayor, and then my life unfolded in rectangles of light, a blurred image of Claire's hand in Dee's, a photo of them laughing, a close-up of a text where Claire wrote, "I'll see what I can do." The band stuttered to silence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Somewhere, a woman swallowed hard. Claire's face drained of color like paint washed off a canvas. For a moment she clutched at the nearest friend as if to anchor herself. People around her shifted, a tide of judgment rolling in that no one could have predicted but everyone immediately understood. The hush that followed was heavy with the knowledge that what had been private was now public, and in Charleston, that could be worse than any other punishment. Someone called out, "Claire," like a prayer and an accusation at once. She tried to speak. Her voice didn't work. I watched the shock peel back from her face to something raw and animal, fear. Dee did not appear then. He would have come if he wanted to challenge me in public, but men like him preferred their victories in rooms where consequences could be negotiated away. The absence was part of my plan, to make her face the absence of protection. I could have walked over to her then. I could have grabbed her hand and left quietly, away from the lanterns and the town spectacle. But that was never what I wanted. Revenge has many forms, mine was not to reclaim or to reclaim anything. It was to reveal, to make the mirror impossible to ignore. After the initial shock, questions moved through the crowd like locusts. Who took those photos? Who arranged the projection? Whispers named me before the mayor did. They always name the man who breaks the pattern when something in the pattern snaps. Claire fled the garden. She moved fast and graceless, barefoot on the gravel, that practiced smile gone, and for the first time in years I really saw her, not the woman under soft lighting but the woman who'd been hiding pieces of herself in plain sight. She stumbled toward the lane and then ran, the dress catching on a lantern stand. People called after her, some with concern, others with the cold satisfaction of voyeurs who have finally seen the show promised by gossip. Afterwards, the collision of social forces was quick and efficient. An older woman who knew Claire's family called a cousin who sat on a board that contracted with one of the firms Claire's team had been courting. An untraceable email, the one I'd sent weeks earlier, moved through HR departments with the speed of rumor. Clients asked for meetings. Dee's firm, already nervous about whispers, put him on a leave pending an investigation. His LinkedIn messages multiplied like bees around honey. I expected triumph to feel like warmth. Instead it was a cold clarity. I watched as lines were drawn and reputations were reconsidered. Claire sent me a message later that night, a single sentence, "Why?" I could have answered. I could have given 1,000 explanations that would have painted me as anguished and noble, but I didn't. I typed one line, "Because you made space for it." The next days were worse than the night itself. Claire emptied our bedroom of the things she could stomach to carry. There was no screaming, only the sound of plastic boxes being taped and the soft clack of her shoes as she moved through the house like a ghost. She met me once on the porch, eyes rimmed red but defiant as well. "You did this," she said. The words were simple, like someone assembling a familiar tool. Yes. I had no right to the gentleness I tried on my lips. I did. "You humiliated me," she said. "You ruined me. You lied to me." I said it like a litany, a list of everything that had been traded away without permission. "You made choices that involved someone else. You kept secrets about where you put your heart. You think you were the only one," she shot back. "Do you know what it's like to feel lost inside your life? To look at someone who listens the way Daniel listened? You want to paint me as the villain." "I don't want to paint you at all," I said. The honesty in that line surprised me, it felt like a blade and a bomb together. "I wanted you to be accountable." She laughed once, a small sound like glass. "Accountable? To you? You think this will fix anything? It will make the town talk. You'll watch me get smaller in every circle we used to move through. And you'll feel better." "For how long?" The question landed like a stone. I couldn't answer. The legal part came fast. I filed for divorce within the week, and the attorney I'd found insisted on including the photos as evidence. A judge saw them and signed what needed signing for a temporary order of protection, not against Claire, but a mutual agreement about separation, access to accounts, and who would take the house in the interim. Charleston's courthouses had their own quiet rituals, paper could do what whispers could not. My folders, the backups, the receipts, the photographs, made the truth tidy and legal. Dee's downfall, in contrast, was more public than mine. His firm released a statement about professional conduct in conflict with company values, and placed him on indefinite leave. Clients withdrew, and within a month he'd been let go. He called once, voice raw with the kind of fear men rarely let themselves feel. "You wanted them to see," he said. "No," I answered. "I wanted them to know." He was arrested weeks later after an anonymous complaint alleged inappropriate behavior with a client, a complaint I had not filed but one I had seeded by feeding the rumor mills the right facts at the right time. The timing was surgical. Perhaps that made me monstrous. Perhaps it showed how precise a strategy could be when you stripped away all else. Claire left Charleston. She didn't argue the divorce. She moved into an apartment 3 states away and took a job far from the clients who had once admired her. Sometimes I would see photographs on social media, a framed landscape, a blurred face at the beach, and wonder if she was okay. Mostly, I felt the absence like a draft you can't seal. The house stayed. I kept it for a while, sitting in rooms that remembered laughter and legal forms in equal measure. I arranged the furniture the way we used to, as if setting a table could reset what had been broken. It didn't. Months later, I found myself on the same rooftop where I'd first spoken to Daniel. The Cooper River glittered below, indifferent as ever. The city hummed, oblivious to the small stages on which people acted out their lives. I thought about the man I had been when I first noticed the change in Claire, he who loved without suspicion, who trusted without files. I thought about the man I had become, patient, calculating, and cold. I wondered which one had been the true man and which a reflection of the other. Revenge had been a ledger that balanced for a moment and then demanded more entries. I had won the accounting. I had taken names and reputations, and they had been returned to me in a currency I did not want. The town had its story now, people told it in the grocery line and at church. I had become a character in a narrative not of my choosing. In the end, the victory tasted like the ash of paper burned in a still room. I had exposed what was hidden, and the light that came with that exposure warmed no one. Claire's face sometimes haunted me in small, private ways, in the steam on the bathroom mirror, in the hollow between the church bells. I thought often of Daniel too, less as an antagonist and more as a man who had learned too late that appetite without consequence is a dangerous teacher. One evening, months after the last papers were signed, I placed a small box on the porch table. Inside was our marriage certificate, the thin paper the clerk had initialed, the document that had once felt like a contract with the future. I burned it in the fire pit, and the corner curled into flame and then ash. As the certificate darkened, I felt something like relief and something like sorrow, indistinguishable until the last crumb of paper fell. When the wind scattered the ash across the yard, it carried a small part of both of us away, too. I watched it go and felt, with an honesty that surprised me, how deeply I had been tired of the waiting and the pretending. I had wanted a resolution, and I'd chosen a path that led through ruin. Charleston kept its lanterns lit that night, and the Magnolia stood, patient and unknowing. People continued to move through the town, trading in manners and secrets, making new bargains. I sat on the porch until dawn, the heat of the night settling into my bones, and understood that some debts are paid and yet never resolved. The reckoning had been complete, but the cost remained, exact and cold. I had taken my revenge. I had won. And I was forever altered by the calculus of it.